Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
We knew it was coming, and now it's finally happened. Does the candidacy of RFK Jr. as an independent change anything?
Well, the answer is it certainly could. Should change a lot of things.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways to look at this. The first thing is to explain, I think, what happened. This wasn't RFK saying, I'm running for the nomination of the Democrat Party. He already said that. He basically stated that at Independence Hall, a lot of drama, pretty cool. He was declaring his personal independence from the Democrat Party and from all other political parties. Now you say, well, the Tommy boy, Lottie frickin' da. What difference does that make? All right, you're one guy and now you're independent. So what? Welcome to where most Americans are. They're not allegiant to either. They have not declared their allegiance to either of the two parties. Okay. Well, it matters because he's then also announcing he's running as a candidate for the presidency as an independent. Now, again, what difference does that make? What's the difference between him and umpteen other people who run as third-party candidates or independents? The question is, does his campaign understand what it takes to actually change the presidential election, coming at it as an independent?
Isn't it also worthy? I always used to use this expression, the making of the messenger versus the message of the messenger. And if you understand the making of the messenger, the message has credibility and meaning. I don't think it's sleight of hand. I mean, I've watched a lot of interviews with this guy, and I think this is a genuine place he's come to. He has been frustrated in the Democrat Party. He has not been embraced by the Democrat Party. He has seen the party change from his uncle, Jack, to his uncle, Ted, to Barack Obama, to Joe Biden and John Podesta and a lot of others in between. And I think there's a genuine mistrust and a false choice he has felt. I think it's significant, David, that he starts as a human being saying, look, this is dysfunctional. It's not functional for me. I have made this change in my life. And with that, I'm now changing how I'm running for president.
Yeah. And so that's a significant factor. Now, RFK Jr. is a very thoughtful person. He's very well studied. He studies history, and he clearly has tremendous passion, and that's exhibited in his life choices. Now, he is far from a perfect person. I mean, we watched him in his lengthy interview with Bill Maher in Maher's podcast, where Maher's sitting there smoking weed and drinking whiskey,
tequila,
and asking, Bobby Jr., you care for any? And Bobby Jr. says, no, I don't think I'd like to risk my life of sobriety based on that.
20 years of sobriety.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's a guy who definitely experienced the thorns of drug addiction and who's come out of that and he's paid the price for it. I mean, so this is a guy who understands what it's like to be broken. I want to be very careful because people overhearing us are likely to say, now, wait a minute. Whoa. I get you guys wanting to talk about being independent and what that means in history and so on and so forth. This is getting risky because I can only function in a world of red and blue shirts and skins. I cannot function if you add another person on the court or on the field that doesn't have the right color uniform. Form or again, I can't deal with that. There's going to be a lot of breaking glass in people's minds because so many people have been raised to absolutely believe America is a two-party system. It was constitutionally framed as a two-party system, and that simply isn't true. So,
and the last time for the Republicans it happened, it was a disaster with the Perot effect. That still lingers with the older Republicans.
And so the first question is, what is this? This is a declaration of a credible individual who appears to have significant name ID and funding that could create an impact in the upcoming election. This is not just cute. This is real. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Whether it's acknowledged by the media or not.
Doesn't matter.
It's also a matriarch of the Democrat Party, the Kennedy family and legacy, saying this party has now moved so far to the left, I'm no longer a part of it. That's a significant loss to their party.
Well, and of course, then there's all the thing that you talked about earlier is what the party's become. Okay, let's leave all the Democrat stuff on the side because that's okay. We get that part of it now. All right. So before we get even into is the threat real, let's talk about what are the specifics. It's one thing to say, yippee, I'm an independent candidate for the presidency. That doesn't get you a single vote registered because you've got to get on the ballot.
Right.
And getting on the ballot is a process that happens state by state. And each state has a different set of signature requirements that have to be collected by petition to enable someone to get on the ballot. Now, that takes a lot of money,
A lot of time.
a lot of organizational skill, people with real serious experience who understand how to do that. And most people in politics have no idea. They love the drive-through lane when it comes to elections.
We're approaching mid-October. Is there enough time?
Oh, yeah, there's enough time for him to be able to qualify on the ballot for next year. He's got plenty of time, but they've got to have a serious amount of money, a serious amount of organization, and people know how to gather petitions. And some of those petitions, they may be as few as 10,000. Some are as high as 40 or 50,000. Now, those numbers are not gargantuan. Like when you try to do a ballot issue in a state, you're usually facing 400,000 or 500,000, even more, 700,000 in states like Florida, where you've got, now that is a major, major task because most of those signatures have to be gathered by people who do that for a living. And those signatures can cost you upwards of $5 and more, sometimes $10 per signature. It's not an inexpensive, because you have to put people on the road.
Now you're tens of millions.
Yeah. You got to put people on the road who do that, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So it's a task. I'm sure they've evaluated all of that. I'm sure they've looked at that, and they wouldn't walk into this lightly. But that's the first thing, is they've got to get on the ballot. Now, can they get on the ballot in all 50 states? If they have enough money and they have enough organization, they have enough time.
But they should be prioritizing the states where they can do the best, shouldn't they?
Well, now that takes us to the next question. Do you think you can win it? Because if you think you can win it, then you've got to be in all 50 states. All right, or just about got to be in all 50 states. Now, maybe, believe it or not, you don't go to California.
Why bother? That would be my comment. Or New York.
Because, yeah, it's when you're dealing with a single party state, that an independent at best could come in second. Second is last in a presidential election in a winner-take-all state.
Can I play 40 years of your experience like a piano for a second? If we were going to make a list of places that RFK, remember now, with RFK, you don't have to win to win, all right? Because you're creating a three-person race. You have to get the majority of the three, or in some states where they split the delegates, portions of the delegates. I think he plays very well in Minnesota. I think he plays very well in Illinois. I think he plays very well in Michigan. I think he plays very well in New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I can think we could make this list together. And I would hope that's where he's focused. If he is, then I don't care if the mainstream media wants to ignore this or not. This guy's a player because everyone he reaches, the message is historically accurate. It is an all-time, our time, and moment right now message that is resonating. Now, it hasn't ignited, and he had the whole party fighting against him with Democrats. How does he resonate with Democrats now coming from the independent angle? Well, and then we'll do Republicans. Again, I would think quite well.
When you look at the voting registration in states, there are huge numbers of independents. The first thing you do is you take a look at the states that have the highest level of registered independents or non-aligned. So the first state you come to is Ohio, because in Ohio, more than 60% of the voters are independent or non-aligned. Now that's a fair fight. You now have three people fighting for the largest voting bloc. So that's an interesting situation. You look at the states that have the highest numbers of independents. That's the first thing. Then you look at the states that Trump won by 10,000 or less in 2016 and Biden won by 10,000 or less in 2020. And those are those familiar states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. Then you go there. Now, this is a fascinating board game, and it's all legit and it's all real. Now, the question of can you win or not? Remember, Abraham Lincoln won the election of 1860 and did not win any of the states of the Confederacy in that election. Now, this is before they seceded from the Union. He didn't win one. He barely campaigned in the 11 states of the South, and he still became president because he understood the numbers in the Electoral College. Now, it's hard to believe that RFK Jr. can win the Electoral College. You have to get 50% plus one of the electors in the Electoral College. Pretty hard to imagine he could get that unless he was in all 50 states. That's hard to believe. So the question is he running to win? Is he running to spoil? Or is he running to throw this into the Electoral College vote in the Congress? Because nobody can win.
And so I've come here today to declare our independence from the tyranny of corruption which robs us of affordable lives, our belief in the future, and our respect for each other. But to do that, I must first declare my own independence. Independence from the Democratic Party, and from all other political parties. I haven't made this decision lightly. It's very painful for me to let go of the party of my uncles, my father, my grandfather, and both of my great-grandfathers, Honey Fitzgerald, and Patrick, who was the first Irish Catholic ghetto mayor of Boston, and Patrick Kennedy, who was a ward boss in Boston. Both of them launched our political dynasty over 100 years ago. But my sacrifice is nothing compared to the risk our founding fathers took when they signed the Declaration of Independence 247 years ago. They knew that if their revolution failed, every last one of them would be hanged. They chose to place everything on the line. When John Adams put his pen down after adding his signature to the Declaration, he turned to those present and he said to them, sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish. From this day on, I am with my country. I'm going to make that same pledge to you today, so that I can stand before you, as every leader should stand before you, free of partisan allegiance, free from the backroom deals, servant only to my conscience, to my Creator, and to you.
So let's go with the craziest scenario, if you will, the constitutional scenario that is most fascinating. It's happened before in history. This would be the second time, if it would happen, that the election would be thrown into the Electoral College. What does that mean? Nobody wins enough electors to get to 270 because RFK Jr. has pulled a handful off the board. So Biden can't win. He can't get to 270. Trump can't get to 270 because Bobby Kennedy is sitting there with, let's say he's got 100 or something like that. Wow. Now what do? Constitution says those three players, their names are presented to the United States Congress, and the United States Congress votes on who they want to be president. But it's not a simple majority vote of the Congress. It's a vote by state delegation. So there are 50 delegations in the Congress, and those 50 states each get one vote. They vote as a delegation for one of the three candidates.
That means even though states have different numbers of members of the House, all have 2 senators. Let's say you have 5 congressmen or women, and those 7 have to come down to one consensus vote.
Exactly.
Which I think is what is very fascinating about that, David, is the way it plays out in the primary process and then the general election is, can RFK penetrate both parties, penetrate a biased media, and reach American voters, and voters, especially in those swing states that were decided by 10,000 votes, make enough of an impact. And then if he does, then it goes to Congress, and now we'll find out how 2-party system Congress is.
Well, yeah, because here's what it comes down to. Ohio gets 1 vote. New Hampshire gets 1 vote. Massachusetts gets 1 vote. California gets 1 vote. Florida gets 1 vote. Now, the way the congressional delegations are stacked up right now, there are more states whose delegations are majority Republican than there are majority Democrats. In other words, it doesn't matter how big the California delegation is and that they're all Democrats, they get, or almost all Democrats, they get 1 vote. Well, when you add up the number of states right now, it would basically be the Republican would beat the Democrat. So in essence, RFK Jr. would have run in vain. He threw it into the Electoral College, and the Republicans win because they've got more delegations statewide. They'd have more votes. The Republicans would win. So what was the use of it all? Well, for one thing, it's a tremendous history lesson. For the other thing, it proves the point that an independent campaign can literally derail the typical drive-through presidential election that's controlled by the 2-party system and their billions of dollars and their allies in the media. And it ends up showing that our Constitution makes provision for situations like that and that the Republic still works. It makes him a legend in history because that's only happened one other time.
Well, it also sends a message to the extreme left and the extreme right that this organically developing centrist sensibility in America is now at the political forefront, and you better start making some adjustments, or America's going to make them for you. I mean, if he's successful.
But what happens if he pulls enough delegations inside the Congress so that the offset is such that nobody gets a majority? What if the Democrats get, let's see, there's 50 states, so I'm just doing this math. What if the Democrats get 20, the Republican gets 20, and RFK Jr. gets 10?
Even at that, it's a blow to the two-party system.
But I mean, we don't have a president.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's that too.
So then we have to vote again, and 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 we have to vote again until somebody gets the majority. Uh-oh.
And that would be the existing Congress, right? So that wouldn't be impacted by the makeup of Congress that would have changed through that election cycle.
No, that'll be the new Congress.
They would wait for the new Congress on that? That's a whole other wrinkle, isn't it?
No, actually, no. Let's take that back. No,
I don't think it would be.
No, because it would happen on January 6th, and the electoral votes would be counted, and then you'd have to go into...
It's prior to their session.
They would, yes. So they would end up having to vote and vote and vote and vote and vote until somebody had a clear majority of the delegations. Can you imagine the amount of deal-making that would be happening right there?
I'm looking at polling information. I'm going to take the chance of just kind of summarizing. I can tell you that in late September, early October, 62% of the polling in a primary pointed to Biden, 24% to Kennedy, 7% to Williamson. Then the next one was 22%, and so on. Can I ask you, why don't you think, if 70% don't think Biden's up for another term, if close to 70%, don't want him to run, and 40% or more are supporting anybody but him, do you think Kennedy should have done better in this, or was it shut down by the party in such a way that it couldn't get traction?
No, there was nothing to even discuss. It was Podesta and the whole machine. Nobody's going to buck the machine, because if you buck the machine, you have no income and no future. So there's that part's done.
So it's a false lack of Democratic spark. And would this ignite in a different way as an independent?
I'll tell you, this is a fascinating time to be alive in history. It really is. The most attractive part of RFK Jr.'s message is the part of saying we need to become independent of the political parties, because people are sick unto death. They are tired beyond imagination of the political parties in our country and the mess that this power curve, regime control the budget, all that nonsense. People are very tired of that. Now, it's not.
But the divide has gotten so great, it's almost dysfunctional too, right?
Well, it is in so many ways. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. But you said something a couple of conversations ago that stuck with me, and I just repeated it to my wife today. The fact that some of the best times in the modern era for governance in our country were times when you had a president who had to sit down and work with a Speaker of the House, like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, like Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. When the divided government had to come together, some of the best alternatives and best policies came forward, and America prospered. So this is sort of the appeal of what would happen if we actually had a person who was so independent that Congress had to deal with the White House.
How do you avoid the Perot effect? I don't think it would have the same.
So what's the Perot effect? Just the spoiler effect, you mean?
Yeah. I think he's far more substantive than Ross Perot. I think he's far more in line with the American people on the topic of independence versus party partisanship. I think the way when we break down these states, it plays out, it's different than Perot. And the part about who would affect the most, he's got more to gain. He's got a lot more Democrats that are not satisfied with what they have. But I can look over on the other side of the aisle, and I can tell you there's not much interest or traction for anybody that's on the debate stages. Donald Trump's at 35%. Everybody else is nowhere. So that begs the question, is 65% of Republicans open to somebody? Because if you are, and you listen to RFK and you don't buy what the mainstream media wants you to believe, he's just an anti-vax nut, but really substantively, historically, and policy-wise, listen to him. It's wooing. Yeah. And it's different than Perot. Perot didn't have 60% on one side and 40% on another to draw from. at a time where the climate was
Perot was a mega billionaire with a personality that could not be silenced, and he was a protest candidate.
And it hurt Bush, who just raised taxes.
Yeah, and so he was a protest candidate. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is different. This is a different situation because you're dealing in a circumstance where the majority of people don't like either of the candidates who appear to be the nominees. Now, it's kind of an American thing that if the people you've been working with can't give you what you really think we should have, then you basically do it yourself. I mean, this is kind of the American thing that we've been doing for a long time. So the potential of being a spoiler is very, very high. But again, it's a fantasy that someone could heal the nation from an independent presidential position. That's not going to happen. We've been in this mess for a long, long time, and healing doesn't happen in an election, and it doesn't happen in a singular personality. So let's not run away with thinking we've captured.
Even when they convinced themselves that Barack Obama was that, he wasn't.
No, I mean, this is not the Holy Grail. This is not the final unicorn. We're not here. But this is going to be very interesting.
We used to talk a lot about Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
And I said something that caught your attention years back. I said,
the idea
of Ted Cruz is so much better than the real Ted Cruz. Isn't that what DeSantis has become? The idea of DeSantis is much better. Or the governor DeSantis versus the presidential candidate.
Well, but see, I warned you, this is what happens to frontrunners. I remember I told you months ago that the most dangerous thing you can be coming into a presidential election is the perceived front runner.
But we've given everybody a fair shake, from Donald Trump to Joe Biden to DeSantis to Nikki Haley. We've done all of them. What intrigues me about RFK is that if it ever came to this, I think of the Donald Trump only supporters. And I get that. He's the only one that you believe isn't inclined to serve others or be influenced by others and be true to his word. He's got your loyalty. But if this ever breaks out, it's going to turn to him and his COVID betrayal. And I think that would be interesting to see happen, just from an election historical standpoint. And then for the left, the spending, the inflation, the silencing, the picking and choosing of winners and losers, wokeness over common sense, or our history or our identity. This would be fun. If this was a football game, this is the one I'm watching. This isn't the Jets and the Patriots.
Well, this whole thing just got a lot more interesting.
At a time where what it is right now, Sleepy Joe and Trump not even engaging and winning overwhelmingly, there's nothing to watch. That's not even a game.
No, this has gotten a lot more interesting, Michael. And again, I want to be careful. And it's not because I'm afraid of endorsements, but for 43 years, I've worked in a nonprofit community that involves itself in public policy at some of the deepest levels. We work with all these people. Now, we are not without opinions. When it comes to candidates, I'm not going to make an endorsement for or against. And I'm also not going to try to shade the field for one person or the other. The people that we're now talking about, there are three people. They are all flawed. None of them are perfect, but they do represent three very different approaches that would be taken. And one is now the disruptive technology that Trump was in 2016. It's kind of like what Donald Trump started, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is picking up on and taking it up a level.
And I'll say this, when he does it, whether it's authentic, and I believe it is, or just comes across that way, it feels like it really is about you, the people, or us, the people, and not that person's personality, ego, which will be very interesting to see. I think they're both still disruptive technologies, quite frankly. I think Donald Trump still has a disruptive technology about him with a certain group of the electorate. But it becomes a more less expired date version of it in RFK if it gets traction.
We've got to keep these conversations going, friend, because this is the sort of stuff that somewhere there might even be a Pulitzer Prize winning novel that's going to come, or documentary or something that's going to come out. This is going to be, if this continues in this direction, this presidential election, without a doubt, will be the most interesting one we've seen in a long, long time.
Because it's already going to be the most impactful. The most important, interesting thing that you've said today that I heard, and I think I got duped by the mainstream media. He didn't announce he's running as an independent candidate. He announced and quite eloquently and historically and intimately explained why he's become an independent. And because he's an independent, he's running as an independent. That's a significant difference.
Yeah. And for the record, I wrote a book back in 2010 called Free Agents. The idea that Americans truly desire to be free agents. They believe in their Constitution. They believe in their Declaration, but they've never been baptized in the two-party system. This is the way to have true impact, is to free yourself from the parties and be a free agent. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be a Republican, you can't be a Democrat, you can't support one sometimes and others the other. But the fact is, this is the trend. This is also what the Tea Party was about. People freeze the Tea Party in time because, as Michelle Bachmann was famous for saying, it was absorbed by the Republican Party. You know what? Yes and no. Yes and no. There's a lot of people that know we're being taken for a ride by both these parties in Washington, D.C. that function as a uniparty. The person who is able to articulate that message well and better than his opponent is going to get traction.
Did you see that?
No. What was that?
My Jack Kennedy statue just winked at you. He liked that part.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.